funny because I think it's very funny, and that's exactly what we were memeing. Actually, if you look up that tweet, it's a pasta. It's not. We just put it. You can find 100 ladies having made that same post saying that they took money from Peter Thiel to. You should read it too. That what it's saying is that Peter Thiel is giving us emails of tweets that we should retweet personally, like 20 to 30 tweets that he asked us to retweet. It's pretty clearly a joke.
Okay.
But the funny thing is, Nick, I was so surprised is we were actually mocking libtards who had canceled us previously for other random associations. To add to the list, we've also done things with Praxis. They also get accused of being deal-backed. It's our native impulse is to, just lean into it. If people are going to accuse us of things, it's funny, and we're just going to mock them and put out bait to get fake cancels, like light a fire and just, have a laugh. But what was surprising to me is I didn't even know there was a General Thiel-backed conspiracy from the right. I spent the last few days trying to learn a little bit about what your position was there. And I guess, you're anti-Zionist is what it comes down to, right?
Well, that's certainly a part of it. I mean, I would put it simply by saying that these people like Mark Andreessen, Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, they all come from the PayPal mafia. They all come from that tech venture capital world. Like, there's significant overlap with, Andreessen was on eBay, and, Thiel was into Facebook, and Andreessen is an advisor to Zuckerberg. And, so these people come from a very specific milieu. And there is also big overlap with the intelligence world. Obviously, Palantir was funded by In-Q-Tel in the beginning, and first contractor was CIA for 10 years. And so I'm very suspicious of their connections to the intelligence world. That's a big part of it. And then I would also, to make it very simple, I would say that I don't think that my idea of the right wing aligns with theirs. I think that, one of them, I forget off the top of my head who said it, but they're Silicon Valley liberals. They claim to be Silicon Valley liberals. Peter Thiel is gay. Sam Altman is gay. Many of them are immigrants. Thiel, David Sachs, these guys are immigrants. They're pro-gay. I don't think any of them are Christian. Thiel, allegedly Vance became Catholic at the behest of Thiel. He's super into Girard. But there's some, it's a little dubious because he lives a gay lifestyle and he's not going to go to a Catholic church. So, and Thiel is maybe one of the better ones, arguably, if there are better ones. So you have this group of basically secular humanist, like socially liberal, techno-libertarians, and as a Catholic nationalist, who I wouldn't call myself, strictly speaking, a white nationalist, but I do support white identity politics. I find myself totally at odds with them philosophically, and I think that they have put a lot of money into these projects to convince people that it's basically to create a Trojan horse. It has some of the trappings of like a dissident right movement, and it styles itself in that way, but it's concealing the fact that, that they're really bringing forward this libertarian liberal agenda. And then I feel like that with Trump. I feel like that with this populist movement. And so I wouldn't say it's me, the way you said it, is that I'm canceling everybody with connections to Thiel. I want to make it transparent so that people understand exactly, where to follow the money and who's paying who and what they're getting. And then I'm arguing that, okay, so if these projects are backed by these intelligence contractors who are gay immigrant liberals, like obviously they probably don't align with my values, our values, me and my community. So that's kind of the basis of it. And I mean, do you think that's objectionable?
I think you're generally accurate. They could be described as techno-libertarians. I think where I disagree is just your methods of disagreement. I mean, right in our first interaction, your first impulse was to dox me. I've historically very strongly argued against doxing in any fashion. I'm a big believer in the marketplace of ideas, with as Twitter or any blogging, all as a commons where we can share a discourse and debate openly, and in private, not be persecuted for what you might have shared in the comments, with the comments being a place where we can just, even like on your show, you often do bits. You're not very serious about everything you say, but people can take it out of context and treat it very literally, and it's in bad faith. In the same way, like you can disagree with a guy like Peter Thiel or, for example, Curtis Yarvin. But what's shocking to me is you come in here and you're like doxing them, and you're like doxing these people that are like, I mean, I've talked to them, and not all this list of figures, but like Passage Press, for example, they're good people. I might not agree with like everything they say, but they are advancing the same kind of right of bringing back an open discourse and these sort of like the dark intellectual web and these ideas that were suppressed over the last 10 years under, the last censorship. So I just don't really, because I don't really understand why are you so aggressive and like divisive towards them?
Well, I would say in the first place, regarding doxing, I actually agree with you. I mean, I was really doxed. I think we do have to distinguish between a hard and a soft dox. Posting someone's identity is one thing, and then someone who is a public figure posting their address and phone number is something different. And I got hard doxed. Like my address went and blew up and got 20 million impressions on X, and someone showed up and tried to kill me at my house. Like that, so I get it.
You pepper sprayed them. That was pretty based.
Well, I can't comment on that because I got fucking charged in connection. It's just fucking bullshit. But that's the allegation. So I'm with you, and from my understanding, your identity had been out there already. You had been doxed previously, so I do see that as different. And for what it's worth, when it comes to the soft form of doxing, revealing people's identity, I'm a little bit less sympathetic about that when it concerns public figures. Like, for example, somebody like Bronze Age Pervert. This is a guy who's super influential, is a writer, and he gets reviewed in Claremont Review of Books, which is very spooky. Claremont Institute, founded by Harry Jaffa, who was a disciple of Leo Strauss. He's the founder of the West Coast Straussians. Claremont is funded by Peter Thiel and Paul Singer. Paul Singer is like a Jewish Israeli nationalist, super pro-gay. Peter Thiel is gay, and half his net worth is tied up in an In-Q-Tel intelligence contractor. They reviewed his book because Curtis Yarvin gave it to Michael Anton. And Michael Anton is now, I think, an advisor on the National Security Council, or he's a policy advisor or something. Anton is a student of Harry Jaffa. And it's like, so now they review his book, and this is what makes him blow up. And he gets talked about in Politico and the New York Times. They write favorably about him. And, I initially, so the reason I'm saying this is because it kind of connects to what you said, why am I so aggressive? Aren't these guys like broadly right-wing? Don't they promote like a dark intellectual kind of thing? That was how I felt about them for a long time. But what was the question that I asked myself is why? Because really, not to be like juvenile, but Bronze Age Pervert started it with me. This is how it all started. Me and him, I actually had him on my show. I said, come on my show. He sent Mike Ma, who designed the cover for Selective Breeding, and he does the graphic design for Steve Saylor's speaking tour, and Mike Ma's obviously in that world. He sent Mike Ma to read pre-written answers to my questions on the show. So, and I think that was the first interview that he did for Bronze Age Mindset when he came out with the book many years ago. So I used to associate with him, and I talked to him in DMs, and we were mutuals. Then, during the Groyper War 5 years ago, so in 2019, in the fall, I hosted a very small get-together. I mean, literally like 20 people, 25 people, and they were all friends of mine. And Bronze Age Pervert goes on Twitter and says, "This is Charlottesville 2. Don't go. You're going to be doxxed. No one should go. Face fagging is, counterproductive to what we're trying to do." And I reached out privately, like everybody says to do. And I said, "Hey, man," I said, "that's really not what we're doing." I said, "It's 25 people. We all know each other." I said, "Are you going to take it back?" And he goes, "No, you shouldn't do it." I said, "Well, you're a fucking liar then." I said, "Because here I am explaining to you what it is, and you're telling people not to go." And that's where it started. And, he's been amplifying a lot of bad faith attacks against me. If he wants to attack me for being Catholic, there is an intellectual disagreement between neoliberals and Catholics. Fine. But he's amplifying smears. So I asked and I'm not trying to ramble here, but I said, why is this guy coming after me? What's really going on? And so I started to peel back the layers, and he had already been doxxed. And we start talking about who he is. And it turns out, this guy goes to MIT, Columbia, Yale. And we start to see who he's connected with. He was at Columbia at the same time as Bari Weiss. She writes an article in Columbia Spectator in the end of 2004. He writes an identical essay for Columbia Spectator in early 2005 about Columbia unbecoming. People can look that up. It was a big controversy about pro-Palestine professors on the campus, and all the Israelis were trying to shut it down. And Bari Weiss was working for this group called the David Project. Then she goes to Israel to get trained up by Yoram Hazony to write op-eds. And then she writes under Bret Stephens. She's the protege of Bret Stephens.
Hey, Nick, you're...
Yeah.
You're kind of...
Okay,
You've covered all this ground before.
I'm sorry.
I've seen,
let me...
The thing is...
let me tie it up.
I get the sense of it.
Okay, well, let me wrap it up then. I'll just say this. So here's the point. It matters who these people are, okay? And the ones that are saying, "Oh, you can't say who we really are," it's like, because you're right.
Nick?
I think he disconnected. I can't hear him.
Can you hear? Shows a speaker to me. I don't know.
Yeah, Nick, you there?
No, never mind. He's gone now. I'll look for him. Bring him back.
Cool. Yeah, spaces are glitchy sometimes, even if you are interacting with stuff on X. Once they are getting a few reactions, sometimes you may get disconnected. So this is quite normal. This happens all the time. I think when he's back...
there we go. Yeah, he's back. I'll bring him up. Yeah.
You might check. Is he there?
It says connecting.
Okay.
Yeah, space is real glitchy today. I can't even see Charlotte on the stage right now.
Really?
Yeah, but on
That's
my other
crazy.
monitor I can, so I don't know. It's just weird.
So he's requesting? Didn't see him.
To me, yeah, for Nick it says connecting with a little circle.
What do you see?
On connecting. You're stuck
It
on
says
connecting.
Charlotte is here. Charlotte, you still there?
Yeah. You can hear me?
He just left. He just
Yeah, we hear.
requested.
Okay, there you go.
It looks like he's gonna try again.
Should we bring somebody up?
Hey,
There we
can
go.
you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
Yes,
Yeah,
we
we
can.
can.
We can.
Yeah, all right. So, yeah, I'm here. So just to finish my point, I apologize for rambling. I do think it matters who these people are, and I think the public does need to know. I think that it only benefits basically dishonest, subversive people to be so preoccupied with, you can't know everything that I'm about. I find it very suspicious, and that was a perfect case. And I'm aggressive against these people because honestly they started it. But I'll let you respond to some of that, and then I could pick up from there, because I realize we haven't heard from you in a minute. I'm used to doing a show, so I'll just keep monologuing. So you go ahead.
It's okay. It's just also like I don't know about story. I'm not going to be able to be in a position to defend him, so it's inappropriate kind of to rattle off these stories where they can't defend themselves. I don't know. I've never even actually like directly talked to the guy. I'm a fan of his work. I'm a fan of his book and his writing. I cited some of his ideas as influences in my own thinking, and I think that's what's the most important when you're discussing the question of illuminating who's a glowy, who's a Fed, who's CIA. I think it's more important to look at what it is that they're actually advocating for and the products of those actions. I wrote a post about conspiracy hermeneutics and the kind of way that conspiracy thesis is formed. You have to, by nature, any piece of information you can't know if it's being obscured or faked. You have to assess it with some degree of skepticism. So the only way to know how true something is by forming like a cluster where there's enough smoke so you can assume there's a fire, but you'll never be able to prove it. In like the question of if somebody's actually a CIA agent or a secret Zionist or whatever it is, you'll never be able to prove it 100%. You can only base it off of these like chain of connections, these associations. But it's very, very corrupt to bias, and easily be fed by paranoia. It's much more practical to just look at what is the output of what they're advocating for. So that's what I assess my peers. As an example for Bat, he's a Nietzschean vitalist. Maybe some accuse it of being a bit homoerotic in his posting. I think he does that as a joke. I don't know, but he's advocating for strength and vitality in young men, and I think that's a very productive thing to advocate for. I don't see why feds would come in and encourage that. It doesn't make sense. It's not productive to the project of protecting the state from a dissident resistance, which is really what this dissident right forms collectively, including your camp. We're all part of a general revolutionary movement, very similar to the leftists of the 70s, starting from theory and moving in slowly into institutions and into praxis. But when I look at them, your camp, and you're being divisive, it does seem to me like that is what a Fed would do. If there was a Fed in the space, they would divide against other people on the right and also invoke a purity spiral. Finding reasons to. As an example, you don't like the Jews. Some people do, some people don't. If they do, though, that doesn't mean that. And you think the Israeli lobby, etc., is bad for America project. I have no opinion on that. My opinion is that I believe in American liberalism, and I'm looking towards the future where I'm an AI accelerationist. My head's off into 100 years from now. I'm not concerned about these nation-state politics. I'm just not like mired in that kind of contemporary politics. But when I look at something like, as an example, Curtis Yarvin's techno-libertarianism, I think there's a lot of great ideas there in this discussion, and I don't think I saw a video of outside of Passage Presley, some of the gropers were like throwing coins at the guy, and that's not conducive to an intellectual discourse. It's just harassment. It's the kind of things you expect the left to do on the right. You don't expect it to come from inside the right. That's my contention.
Well, I would reply to your first point, because you said, it doesn't really matter the whom. You said it matters the what, what it is that they say. Yes. And I want to read to you a short quote from one of my favorite authors. This is from Palladium magazine. It says, a peculiarity of contemporary American political life should in conclusion be remarked on. It is worth noticing what happens in conversation or debate, in person or in the press, when anyone tries to shift the subject away from discussion of abstract political and foreign policy ideologies, it's to concrete questions of who and whom. If any party wishes to talk not of ideals and philosophy, but about who actually is making the decisions in government, who is their teacher, mentor, associates, and so on, the response from the usual voices in public is vehemently negative. And yet, despite its unpopularity, the greatest insight comes from precisely this type of history. You know who wrote that?
I am guessing Yarvin.
Costin Alamario. Dr. Costin Alamario wrote that in Palladium magazine, which is funded by Peter Thiel.
I think he's talking about a different kind of situation, though. We're talking about intellectuals.
So he meant, well, no, it really not, because he's writing on domestic and foreign policy, and so does Curtis Yarvin. So do all these people. And I follow his advice. I agree, actually, with that praxis, which is the concrete questions of who and whom. Those are the questions that matter. Those are the questions that have always mattered, as opposed to sort of vague ideology. Because, I mean, honestly,
they're not in positions of political influence. They're talking about people in the government. The question is,
Curtis Yarvin is in a position of influence.
You're not in institutional influence. It's only on a theoretical level.
Not over J.D. Vance.
He's not in a role where he actually wields political power. It's just intellectual influence.
He has no influence over the vice president?
It's intellectual or theoretical. It's not. He doesn't hold a seat of power. The point is,
he's part of the cathedral, wouldn't you say?
He's working his way in there. It's a long march into institutions. I'm sure he's talked about that. In general, with the NRX, that was the recommended strategy: is you influence to the top rather than trying to just instill a populist movement, taking your ideology and Aristotle teaching Alexander the Great. You just influence the people of actual power. But what you're criticizing is their thought, but you're using it on the basis of their these connections that they supposedly have, with the point being that it's actually the CIA that's ghostwriting this thought for them, and that somehow this thought is meant to be productive towards state interest. But then in that case, you can just look at it and see, is it productive to state interest? You don't have to use the entire network of a CIA conspiracy to make that assessment.
It's conducive to somebody's interest, and that's really the question. And that's why I have been preoccupied for the past couple of years with the who and the whom when you look at J.D. Vance, because you can't have it all ways. I mean, you can say, well, you follow Curtis Yarvin. Well, Curtis Yarvin says that the real seat of power is the cathedral. He says the real seat of power is a priestly class of intellectuals, which certainly Yarvin and his acolytes, these so-called dark intellectuals, like you just said, they are marching through the institutions like the radicals from the 70s and trying to take over the seat of power. And that is embodied by somebody like Vance, who obviously comes from this scene because he was mentored and received money from Thiel, and he's mutuals with all these people and so on. So contrary to what you say about, we just need to focus on the ideas and when we gotta not talk about who these people really are, I think that's all we have to talk about is who they really are. And as to I want to get something else.
Vance is on your side, Nick. I mean, he might
so
not be 100%.
Side.
Come on, he's at Tim Walz versus Vance. Vance is 80%.
He's married to an Indian. He's on my side.
Yeah, well, come on, you're an Italian Mexican, so I mean, it evens out.
He doesn't value his race, is the point. He married somebody who's a first-generation immigrant, and I said that during the election. Everybody said it was an ignorant, racist statement. I think it's pretty straightforward. If somebody marries outside their race, it means that they probably don't value their race. And he says as much in his book. He says that his culture is so backwards, and he was so disgusted by it that he married somebody that far outside of his culture and race. It's in his book. And point is, someone like
This guy doesn't know what a beautiful woman is.
My values.
You're purity spiraling. Why does he have to be 100%?
How is that a purity spiral?
You need him to be 100%. Why?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's not a question of purity. It's a question of if a person values their race and their heritage, it's something they wouldn't do. It's got nothing to do with purity. It's just got to do with, if I go and
I mean that of the things that he stands for or believes in, one of them, if racial purity is not a concern for him, but
not purity.
Other points,
why do you say purity?
But not being a race traitor, maintaining your white.
What percentage white is Usha Vance? Zero.
I'm understanding my point. If you look at like the list of things that Vance stands for and believes in, compared to the general politician, the average median, or even on the right, he's like 80% there. Just because there might be some violations that don't agree with you, he's not concerned about a white purity bloodline. You're throwing him out completely.
You're using that word though, purity. It's got nothing to do with purity. It's got to do with what do you value? And the basis of a nationalist movement says that we value our people, that there is something essential about race that made America the way it is. If America were 400 million Nigerians, it would be different than it was 400 million white people. So that is essential to our worldview. If somebody marries the first generation immigrant from Asia, it would follow them that they really don't share our values. And I would say the same, by the way, about like any liberal, like Bari Weiss. Bari Weiss is a lesbian. She doesn't share my values. Is that a purity spiral? She's got a female partner, and it is what it is. You may be more liberal on that. I know Adrian probably is. Many people are. As a Catholic, that's completely contrary to my worldview. As a consequence,
it seems to come off as you're finding excuses to throw people out of your movement and have a reason why nobody is good enough.
That's not true. I like Michelle Malkin.
It can go both ways too. You're a white ethno-nationalist movement for America. The precedent is the nativist movements, like the 1850s to Know Nothing movement or the original Ku Klux Klan. You must be familiar. I don't mean the Hollywood racist, black-hating lynch mobs of Ku Klux Klan, but the actual movement that you must appreciate that they were anti-Semite, but also they were anti-Catholic. They were very concerned about the Catholic immigration. That was their number one concern because they considered it fundamentally alien to the original heritage American. Maybe you could make the same argument for a white Christian ethno-state. You'd have to roll it back not to the 1920s, or really it was 1965 when the Irish Catholic and the Italian Catholics began to become opened up along with the rest of the world, but in 1924 when there were still strong restrictions. I assume you'd also agree that it wouldn't be very conducive to your morals to maintain that strict purity spiral, that it has to be only the lost ethno-state rather than a general white Christian ethno-state.
You're bringing up things that have nothing to do with the subject at hand, which is, we represent in this time, that was 100 years ago. In the intervening 60 years between 65 and today, we've had 40 million immigrants come in here, probably more, that the vast majority of them are not white and not Christian. It's fundamentally transforming the fabric of the country. And it's really simple. There are people that think that this is extremely urgent and existential. It's going to threaten the existence of the essence of America and has to be arrested and reversed. And then there are people that don't really care about that at all, or they think that race is actually not determinative and it's a factor that doesn't matter. I fall into the former category. And people like Vance, and by the way, that whole ilk that champion this colorblind meritocracy stuff, obviously they disagree. People that say that it's a question of citizenship, or it's a question of legal status, or how much taxes they're paying, or something like that. It's a difference in values. And point being is, I don't know why all of a sudden you're defending Vance. All I'm saying is I disagree with him. All I'm saying is we have to look at who they are. Yarvin, Vance, Teal, Bapp. We have to look at who they are, and we have to be aware of what their values are, what their connections are. And I think that we're really not on the same page. And you ask me, why am I being divisive? Why am I being aggressive? I'm not. It didn't start out that way. Initially, I was like you, and I said, Bapp says things that are similar enough until he started attacking the Groypers. And I liked Passage Press and Sovereign House until they banned me. I was in talks with somebody to do an event at Sovereign House, and one of the owners of Sovereign House, Nick Allen, was open to the idea. What?
Okay, you're
we're
going
kind
off
of
on
spiraling. Yeah, we're kind of spiraling here. Something that
This is about the subject. Why am I divisive?
Actually,
let me just say one thing there.
Hang
Let me just say one thing there. No, I don't get Nick Allen. It comes off to me like you're acting whiny. And you're complaining about the whole piece.
So you're
whining about
divisive.
Okay, guys, calm down. All right, look, Nick, let me ask you something.
Why are you rattling this off? I don't even. I don't know what this is.
Okay, Mike,
Adrian?
Yeah, I can hear.
Okay.
Charlotte, can you hear Adrian?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right, guys. So something I want to ask you, Nick, is let's say someone is of a different race, but they do, to a certain fundamental point, embrace some of the values that are important to the country in which you're in. Would that be fine? Because I think your whole struggle is more so about values than it is about race. Is that correct?
No, it is very much about race. And if there is an individual, and let me put it this way. I think that we can have people that are not white in America. There are people that are not white in America. There's large numbers of them. But if America becomes mostly people that are not white, it will be a different country. And you can argue whether that's acceptable or not, but you cannot argue that it won't be a different country. And as somebody that, I grew up in a neighborhood that was 95% white, it will be irreversibly and fundamentally changed by something like that. And I want to preserve that way of living. And that's the clash in values. But, to me,
I don't disagree with you there. But I think it's the idea of rolling back the clock is untenable. I do agree with you that there needs to be a massive immigration reform, and one that's a lot more self-conscious, including in terms of ethnicity and culture and religion. But also, not to keep drilling back to your own personal status. I'm not doing it to insult you, but it was true too of for example, the Italian Catholics in Chicago. I believe you're from. That was the same scenario. People had the identical concerns because when we talk about, I actually agree that it's not just philosophy. There's an element of blood that factors into people's personality and character. That will never falls far from the tree. You can see it from whether son to father. But that was also, in Anglo-Saxon Protestants, it is a big deviation from the Mediterranean as an example. And that was also something that was well, discussed by the founding fathers. You must be familiar with Benjamin Franklin's Nordicist racism.
Yeah, but this is the kind of thing. I actually like what J.D. Vance said in that interview where he said, just because we're a nation of immigrants 300 years ago doesn't mean we have to have, and I feel the same way about this. This is the same kind of, the Italians weren't considered white. That was 100 years ago. But the question now is, in this demographic transition worldwide, as all these countries become minority white, is whiteness worth preserving? I'm not here to debate about, the know-nothings or these various nativist movements from 100 or 200 years ago. I'm here to talk about the demographic transition happening today. But I am curious because I'm really not as interested in debating this with you, with the race of America. I'm interested in the crux of the issue, which is Peter Thiel. That's why we're here. It's what we laid out at the beginning. And you said that you basically accused me of being a Fed, or said that I behave in a way that you would think a Fed would behave because of my needless divisiveness. I started to explain why I'm aggressive towards these people, kind of the genesis of that. And you say, wait, no, let's not talk about that. You said, that sounds whiny. And I'm curious, why don't you want to, do you not want me to talk about Nick Allen and Sovereign House? I mean, what is the issue there?
You're repeating lines that you said many times on the shows. People have seen it. I saw all those clips as soon as we interacted. I don't even know any of these stories. I sound like I'm trying to protect them. Like, don't add me to the conspiracy line that now I'm also part of this Talmudic network. Frankly, the whole Thiel conspiracy seems very dubious to me. Do you think that he's actually like coordinating and influencing them towards some directions, like selecting what kind of parties are thrown at Sovereign House or what books Passage Press is publishing? They seem to just be part of a general movement of a dissident right. It makes a lot of sense. I can see the same kind of influences that we both grew up with online, and the same kind of general conversations and spaces. They just happen to go into one direction while you've gone into another.
Look, this is something that has been going on for as long as there's been a CIA. It used to be called the Congress for Cultural Freedom. Would you have said in the 1950s and 60s, like, do you really think William F. Buckley Jr. is receiving money from the CIA? At the time, you might have said, no, that's a ludicrous conspiracy theory. But the Congress for Cultural Freedom was backing all of actually the intellectual antecedents of this current movement. I do. Wait. Are you going to interrupt me the whole time? Are you going to interrupt me the whole time?
You've got the same allegations.
Wait, can I finish a sentence, or are you going to interrupt me the whole time? Because I think I've not been interrupting you.
Okay, you're right.
So,
go ahead.
Thank you. No, I don't think that when you say conspiracy, the subtext of that is it's kookery. It's a tinfoil hat. It's not credible. I don't think it's a conspiracy theory. It's a conspiracy fact. If you follow the money, if you follow the associations, you will find that, like you said, there is this vast network. You characterize it as a sort of organic, spontaneous coming together of like-minded people. I think that there is a little more to the story there. I think that there is some intentionality. And we can start with the fact that, across the board, all of these projects, look, there are a lot of Jewish people in them, and none of them are critical of Israel. None of them are critical of the Israel lobby. And people that talk too much about that sort of stuff, they're not welcome in that network. And so I don't think I am the divisive one. I think that for as long as I've been doing this, when I was being merely pro-white or right-wing or something like that, I was accepted. The moment that I started to lean too much into criticism or skepticism of Israel's influence, among other things, that is when I became unwelcome. And I think that really is the division. You know that because Thiel goes on Bari Weiss's show. Thiel backs national conservatism, which is run by Hazony. And you say you've heard all this before and so on. Well, these are the relevant facts in the conversation. I mean, Yoram Hazony banned me from NatCon. Nick Allen and future Moldovan citizen banned me from Sovereign House. That attacked the first Groyper Leadership Summit. I never fired the first shot. And by the way, Peter Brimelow got banned from NatCon, run by Yoram Hazony. So it's like, it has been made clear. Go ahead.
I don't even know like half these names and people that you're rattling off.
Well, then you're ignorant.
Okay. I think what we can do.
This debate.
Okay, I think what we can do here
battling
is
their old personal wounds.
right. So here's what we're gonna do. Everybody makes 1 point, and then there's a response. This happens on both sides because I feel like okay. So Charlotte likes to make very compressed points. Nick, you like to kind of elaborate a lot, and I think everything is interconnected with everything. So I could literally start rattling off about how assembly works, and then basically I would begin by saying, I need to first invent the universe. So instead of reinventing the universe, I think we should stick to individual points. So Nick, you make 1, then Charlotte makes 1, back and forth, and you can address each other's points. Because if we make too many points in connection with one another, then we don't actually have a conversation. Okay. So if we could do that, that would be great.
Yeah, so my point is simple, which is I'm not divisive. People like me have been, they have tried to destroy me for my particular views. It's not divisive to fight back. That's my point.
Okay, well, I've been in a very similar situation, so I think that's fair to feel that way. I think right now, with Trump's win, I understand you have your qualms with his current campaign, and you've been hesitant to trust, his whatever moves he's been making. But we are in a new right renaissance. We are winning. We've won, and we're pushing the advantage. And I don't know why you would take this time to keep picking at these old wounds and other people on the right instead of just joining with this new front and pushing the advantage.
Okay, well, I'll answer with one singular point. Why am I not just joining up with the new right? Because Trump signed an executive order saying they're going to direct all of government to shut down anti-Semitism. Am I not somebody that has been, and by the way, I don't identify that way, but am I not someone that has been accused of anti-Semitism? So, it's sort of hard for me to there were like, at the Passage Press party, the one that you were at and the one that you hosted the after party for, so many of the people there, that were there have tried to destroy me. People like Steve Bannon. And it's not picking at old wounds, but you're asking, why won't I just join up with them? It's because they want to destroy me and my movement, and for one very good reason. You could take a wild guess, but we'd have to get into the who and the whom, rather than their abstract, Nietzschean vitalism or whatever they want to call that.
It's an ethnic war, and if one ethnic lobby has money, and they're using that for influence, it's just what it is. Naturally, you'll defend your own race. I'm sure you see that yourself. You do the very same. It's a natural incentive. But I don't think it's a conspiracy. What you have to do is you just win by having more influence and better political positioning. And I'm not saying you need to join up with anybody, but you can make tentative diplomatic friendships or truces, and just you experience a very serious deplatforming, and you've now come back. You're getting platformed again, and you don't need to be in this attack dog mode, rather than just taking your platform and putting out your influence, putting out your views. Doing the space, I got a lot of pushback. People were saying that, like, I can't platform Nick Fuentes. I told him that first of all, I believe in platforming anybody. I think everybody should be able to express their views, and just if you don't agree with them, debate them. But also, second, you already have your platform. It's not like you don't have a stream every day with your followers. But why isolate it rather than just entering the conversation with everybody else? I don't know any of the history between all these other players. I just got suddenly caught up in the middle of it. But all I stand for is I don't engage in these contemporary politics so much as I'm just interested in the actual ideals, and maybe these guys are, but for me, it's philosophy. It's about American liberalism.
Yeah, I guess I'm just sort of confused because, sometimes you'll say you don't know any of the lore and you don't know the people, and then other times you say, yeah, these are your talking points. We've heard this before. And all I'm trying to say when I spell this kind of stuff out is because, exactly what you're saying, I would describe that as the first 5 years of my career, what you're describing, which is, look for agreement and try to form a broad coalition and try to gain influence that way. That was the first 4 or 5 years of my career. And what has effectively happened is that the more that you push on one particular issue, the more that you get pushed back on, and you're right. If I were to change my whole MO and what I talk about, I'm sure they would all these people in this vast network would love to work with me. But it is my obstinate refusal not to omit or censor that part, which is why they won't. It's not for lack of willingness to participate or cooperate in the network. I would love for Bronze Age Pervert to join the space right now, or Lomez, or any of them. And I've been clear about that for a very long time. It is that group that says they will not interact with or talk to or promote anybody that they deem anti-Semitic. That's just a fact. And so,
my impression is it's not anti-Semitism; it's the doxing that's the concern.
That's not. That's not it. That's absolutely not it. It is the fact that we are talking about those things. And by the way, I didn't dox you. You've been doxed.
Well, you did.
So was Bronze Age Pervert.
You promoted it on your platform. Now, for me, it didn't matter. That was like I've long been through it, but you don't know that that could have been something that would escalate into something that could create threats on family or that kind of thing. It's the same. Oh, it's the same as your house getting posted. You mentioned like 20,000 impressions.
Completely different because I've always used my real name and face. It's completely different.
It's the same situation where it's an attempt to silence somebody by making them feel uncomfortable.
So which is it then? Is it that I'm unwilling to be a good sport and talk with them, and I'm the one that's the problem, or is it their refusal but for doxing and not another reason? Which is it?
I got caught up in the middle. I can't say. I don't know. I just think it's unfortunate that things are at this level. And by the way, when you mentioned I say that sometimes I don't know, sometimes I do. It's just because I saw clips of your show where you talked about the whole conspiracy network. Because I tried to understand what was it, what's the issue here. So I didn't know until last week.
Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like I've been saying a very consistent message throughout, and on my show and here and elsewhere, which is, I told you at the very beginning what I stand for. For the things that I say, I have been attacked by these people. And it's because we don't share values, fundamental values. And, and then I fight back, or I try to sort of explicate why we don't agree and why there's a sharp difference. And then I get told I'm whining, or then I get told, some other thing or whatever. I just feel like I'm putting out a very simple and straightforward message. And there's all this kind of ad hoc equivocation coming from you and from these people, because I think I've been very crystal clear about what I'm about and about the history, the record. I'm totally transparent and open about the whole thing. None of these people want to, you, to your credit, you came to the space. I'm curious who told you not to come, because I called you out. And by the way, I called you out because the Ethereum founder, Vitalik, or however you pronounce his name, he attacked me for Vitalik. He attacked me for saying some of these connections. And all I did was lay out the connections. And he replies and says, this guy doesn't even know how to sig hail. What a terrible Nazi. So it's to your credit, you came to the space, but all these other people, for one reason or another, they don't want to show up. And I think that's kind of indicative of the whole thing. Who's really the problem? Am I divisive? I'm sitting here saying I would in a civil way and cordially speak to any one of them, in spite of the fact that, by the way, they have doxed me. They have participated in a hard dox of me and of my followers. And I would talk to any one of them. But they won't reciprocate that, and I think that's because they're a part of a network that is pushing a very specific agenda, and that is contrary to what you're characterizing it as, which is a spontaneous, organic, coming together of people. I think they have a very specific agenda, and I don't agree with it, and that's really what it amounts to.
Yeah, and by the way, when I say people, it wasn't any of them. I didn't talk to any of them about this space. It was just people from the community, people. Ladies on both sides, there's people in our community who think you're a fad. There's people who think you're like a great, they're your fans. I just listen to both sides, but my concern too before going out was like, is this guy going to use a platform to like harass and slur me and my family? You kept it very civil. I appreciate that, So that's what other people were warning me, that it might become dirty. And that would have been deciding whether or not to do this. That was my biggest concern. Like, is this going to be a serious conversation? Listen, I believe in what I believe in. I'm an independent person. Remilia we represent. Honestly, I understand why we have crossover, because we're a big tent. We're an umbrella community to just any kind of free speech and dissident state movement. We on all sides, when you mention like things like, I don't know, lesbian, LGBT, we have that in our community too. But the beauty of it is that they are all brushing shoulders, and even if they get in arguments and fight, they're still kept under the same tent. And that's why when I look at I haven't seen your show. I'm vaguely familiar. I've seen your memes. I've seen the funny clips. You're a funny guy. But suddenly I interact with you and there's like all this drama and dirt being flung around, Even like Vital, like you're calling him deal backed because he received a Founders Fund grant back in like 2015. I mean, you must know that Steele is not involved in Ethereum. Like come on.
I called him Teal backed, and even though he received Founders Fund money, that's the definition of backing. And
do you think Dio is involved in like directing any of Ethereum's development? It's extremely decentralized.
By definition, he is involved. Yes.
I think there is a discrepancy. It's like not backing, but backed in the past. It's like, say for instance, if Elon had, he donated, I think it was $100 million to OpenAI back in the day, that doesn't mean that he's backing OpenAI. Quite the contrary, actually. He backed, in that sense, financially, OpenAI back then, right? So from this perspective, you can say it's backed, not backing, right?
You include Thiel in the conversation around Ethereum. Because of that, you're implying that Thiel is somehow manipulating its direction and influencing it.
There's a lot of overlap. I mean, like Nick Allen is a big Ethereum guy, and he rolls at Sovereign House with the Thiel people. Isn't Allen's dad in the CIA? Aren't his parents in the CIA?
I don't know.
I hope I'm not stepping on any toes with that, but it's like, that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. It's like all these people whose parents are in the CIA, they're all tech people, they're all running in the same circles in the same network. Obviously Thiel didn't like create Ethereum himself, but and by the way, Founders Fund is not just about the money, it's about the network that is created. So he might have gotten a small loan of $100,000, if that's how you want to put it, a long time ago. But he clearly is part of that vast network. And who replied to his tweet? Polymarket. Polymarket replied retardio to his tweet. Polymarket, Peter Thiel's an investor in Polymarket. So, it's like, and, Sovereign House, which is run by Alan, who's an Ethereum guy. Sovereign House hosted Passage Press's Passage Prize, who publishes Yarvin, who's Peter Thiel's guy. So it's like, you don't want to hear the connections, but you also say it's this vast conspiracy, and I don't really buy that.
I don't.
There it is.
This is like you're really stretching it in here.
Okay. Well, people can.
I don't know anything.
It's a stretch.
I can tell you at least like Ethereum. Peter Thiel is not involved in the Ethereum Foundation. You can see if you want to go and dig into it, it's quite transparent in the history of Ethereum. It's played out transparently with a lot of decentralization, and also it's again going back to the what. This is not something that CIA state actors would be interested in at all promoting. It's very distinctly it undermines the entire Federal Reserve and like nation states themselves by producing an uncensorable currency of the people. So again, it's just that's. I don't know about all the rest, but you're really stretching it there with Ethereum. I have to say that. And the Polymarket too. I mean, they're built on Ethereum. Of course they're going to interact with the founder. I mean, that's like, come on.
So a company that deals and but see, and that maybe is really the issue. I mean, if you don't find that convincing, then okay, people can decide for themselves. But maybe there's another area to go into what you just said, which is why would a group which is promoting vitalism and an uncensorable currency, why would they be backed by the CIA or by the Mossad or by whatever? And I think it's pretty well. In the first place, they just are identical with them. There's identity, like there was a consortium put together when Trump won the election with Palantir, OpenAI, SpaceX to bid for government contracts. So by definition, people like Palmer Luckey, who's from Facebook, and his Anduril makes drones that get put on, I think he makes drones. They're deeply connected.
Facebook, he created Oculus, which was acquired by Meta, so that's a little bit of... This is a separate thing, and he was actually ousted from Facebook. Yeah, he was ousted from Facebook because of his political
how did he get ousted if he wasn't there?
My dude, he wasn't at Facebook from like the way that you're describing it is if he was just a worker there. No, he was literally part of the company. It's Oculus, which got acquired by Meta, basically Facebook effectively.
I know, but that's
he actually got fired because of his political views, and his political views was supporting Donald Trump.
And I know that story, but it's like that's how they're all.
Anduril, which is a defense company.
Yes, and Anduril, and Anduril's backed by Teal. Okay, and so people like that. And Oculus, who invested in Oculus? Andreessen Horowitz. So, all these people, they're defense contractors. So you could, we could sit here and argue, what is the benefit of pushing this? We almost have to argue that with the assumption that they are, because they're defense and intelligence contractors, and they're backing this political project. So the question should be better said, why is the defense and intelligence community pushing vitalism? That's actually the right question, because whether they are or not, it's a factual matter. You could Google it or ask ChatGPT. It's there. So I think the reason
but what's the problem with people investing in something that they believe has profit in the future, like it yields profit? I mean, if, for instance, I would have the opportunity to invest in Anduril, and I had the money to do so, I would do it actually, because it's a very interesting project. I think it is, important for warfare in general. Warfare in general means defending the thing that you have, which is a nation. So why wouldn't you invest in it? I don't understand. How is that a bad thing?
Yeah, I'm not against investment in itself. That's not my problem.
This comes back to what I mentioned about conspiracy hermeneutics, where you can take all these chains of information and interpret it in different ways to form a narrative, but you're projecting also, the narrative you're looking for onto it. It's kind of funny because with Vermilia, a lot of the reason why we have these trolls and this bait that's just out there in our lore is specifically as a kind of, we're actually artists, and it's an artistic critique or a satire of this process of conspiracy making, because if you put out information and it's something that people want to be true, then they're more likely to take it up and put it into the narratives that they're already forming. And they form these webs. You put out a few different notes, and then they'll convince themselves of projection. So I mean, you've built a very stretched web here. It sounds strong. It's like, okay, you've gone out to go and connect Palmer Luckey and Anduril and Palantir, all to prove that Peter is a defense agent. He invests in defense, and he's also investing in these other things. He's also just an investor, and he clearly has unique views and things that he talks about. I believe he's, you mentioned Vincent Girard. I believe that comes from Peter Thiel's discussions of Girard. And, he's referenced Nietzsche in talks before. It does make sense that maybe also authentically he has these latent interests on the side, and it's not directly related to every other thing that touches him. And maybe it is, but the people that he's investing into, even if he was a conspiracy mastermind that's nudging things over into a direction to produce some kind of long-term project, they're not going to be getting direct orders. It's all indirect coordination, and it might just be as much as just not wanting to offend. If your major investor is Jewish, you're not going to go and post anti-Israeli things, and that's why you get these levels of awkwardness around what's is an un-PC topic. Even now on the right, as far as free speech and everything, it's just a very sensitive topic because of that capital inflows. But that doesn't mean it's a giant conspiracy. It's just a product of capital coordination. I mean, there's a large Israel lobby that has been operating for 50 years to reach this level of influence. I mean, frankly, when I look at your political project, I don't really understand why you're not also attempting to do the same and just fund an actual lobby in DC for a white Christian identity initiative. Every other minority group has one. Obviously, you couldn't do it anytime until now, but now is a time where there'd be political motion where they would accept you into DC. I don't know. It's just a thought when I look at your work this week. That's just how the game is played. It's influence, it's coordination and position.
I think Nick has another one of those connection issues.
Yeah, his thing disappeared.
Yeah. I kind of want to get back, when he comes back, I do want to kind of shift back to the whole cultural discussion, I think, which I believe is the most relevant, because we can talk about potential connections and what they might mean, or we could talk about the stuff that we actually agree/disagree on. I think when it comes to values, he continues to mention values. He kind of wraps them up in this conceptual connection stuff that he keeps doing, right? Which is fine. It's fine. It's just that I think we should discuss the crux of whatever culture he's trying to put through. Specifically, I actually want to address something about the country changing type of thing, or countries themselves changing. But
Hey, yeah, I was. Hey, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Hey, so I was just going to say, in response to what you just said, it's sort of interesting because you say on the one hand, you say, oh, well, they're not really directing people to say things. There's not a top-down conspiracy just because you've put together this web of connections. At the same time, you say, though, maybe they don't want to offend their Jewish investors, and that's why they don't talk about Israel or the Jewish topic. And yeah, I mean, it's a principle called subsidiarity, which is to say that, Fox News is not going to tell Tucker Carlson, here's what you're going to say tonight. But if Tucker Carlson deviates from what Rupert Murdoch wants, Fox News will terminate him. Case in point. And so really it's a difference without a distinction. Maybe they're not directing it from the top down and writing the script for every shit poster on Twitter who's part of the network, but every shit poster who's part of the network knows that if they cross over into certain territory and it's going to get them in trouble, then they're not going to do it. Or, they don't receive the money if they're identified as having the wrong opinion or something. That's really the point. And that's why it matters who they are. That's the whole question from the very beginning. Why does it matter if someone's getting money from Teal or 1 or 2 degrees of separation? It's for the reason I just said, which is that, if there's money flowing to them, which is coming from these sources, which is coming from, Teal runs Palantir with Alex Karp. And all you have to do is look up who Alex Karp is and what he said to understand that what you're saying is the reality. You have said the actual truth. When you say people don't want to offend Jews in Israel because the investor is Jewish, Alex Karp, Google him and what he has said about the far right in Europe, about his fear of being defenestrated by Christian nationalists. Case in point. So anyway, with that, I guess we've exhausted that topic. If I heard Adrian said he wants to get more into culture, which I'm fine with if we want to talk about. You said you're a liberal. We could talk about that or whatever else. But yeah, that just to wrap up a bow on what I've been saying the whole time. It's like I do disagree with that network, and the network is closed. It is closed. They do not want to hear from Catholic, critics of Israel. And you know that because I'm not the only one that's banished from it. Anyone who's associated with me is banished from it. Anyone who has my views is banished from it. So anyway, so that's that.
I just, I just don't think it's the anti-Semitism. I'm not going to name names, but there are anti-Semites in that network too. It's not like you're the only one to be.
There are not.
Okay. Okay, Adrian, do you want to move on to the?
Yeah, I do want to move on to the
questions.
So Charlotte, how open are you with your identity? Like, race-wise, belief-wise, like how open are you?
It's like I'm doxxed. People have like looked me up. I think it's irrelevant to my general online presence. But I'm a Kashmiri pundit. I'm Indian, so it's often a subject of attack.
Yeah, I can imagine, especially with what's been happening over the last couple months. Of course, I'm pretty sure you were aware of the whole H-1B situation. It was a great time to start it, by the way. This whole argument, around Christmas time, where everybody who normally works very hard goes to spend time with their family. Luckily for me, I'm a person who's constantly active because I love the internet. So I was there when all of this melted down, which was absolutely fascinating. But kind of to the point, though, I think that where I think Nick and I would, for instance, disagree on the idea of values and representing them. I think it is very telling of a nation when someone who is foreign represents that nation's values more than the people within the nation itself who were born there, for instance. Because I think, let's say, you have what is a white feminist, or you have an Indian who is not a feminist, and who is then also someone who represents my exact values as a white person, if I would happen to be one who now lives in America, right? So let's take that as an example. Who should I be dating? Who should I be marrying? Who's better for the country?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
I think that these kinds of questions obscure the reality, because there's a question
That is
of
the
scale.
reality. That is the reality. The reality is that quite a large percentage of the population that would otherwise be very suitable for, say, carrying on the next generation are just incapable of doing so because their brain has been rotted by all the nonsense that they've ingested because of the society that has fallen. I think you would even agree that the society has fallen.
You do this kind of like would you rather. I don't like would you rather questions because we can use politics to shape society. So people will say things like,
"True, but you cannot unfuck this. You cannot unfuck this. This is the thing, unless of course you want to."
True, but wait. But how do you characterize a situation being fucked? Because I'll give you really good examples. Poland and Russia became communist for a century, and everything was fucked. It was completely fucked. But when communism ended, they were still Poland and Russia. If the United States becomes full of non-white people, it could be communist or capitalist. It will irreversibly be changed and never be the same as it was.
But
so I think that's worse.
Here's why I don't think the communist argument necessarily works here. If you look at communism, it was a atheistic ideology. But if you look at the communist countries, most of the people there were still Christian. They were still participating as Christians.
Not in
They were
Russia.
fighting it, and Russia is still significantly Christian, even if
No,
they
it
don't
isn't.
behave like it.
No, it's like 20% Christian. It's not Christian at all. They totally eradicated Christianity. That's the whole point. But Putin is trying to plant the seed of Christianity again, and you can do that when there's continuity. That's the continuity that can't be undone.
Just a little correction there. According to like a 2020 study, there are 82% of Russians identify as Christian.
No, that's not right.
That's what it says here.
What it says where?
Even if we look at Poland, though, Poland was significantly more Christian under communism than it is currently under the liberal ideology.
I don't think you're understanding, though. I don't think you're understanding the point, which is that, whatever you're trying to say, well, it's really arbitrary. The point is the values can change, but the people have continuity. And you seem to care more about the kind of immediate governance of the country. And by immediate, I don't mean like next year. I mean like in 100 years. And I'm talking more about the family tree. I'm talking more about the bloodline. And Germany has gone through, monarchy, National Socialism, communism, democracy, but they remain German. If over the course of this century you have unlimited Africans move there, it won't be Germany anymore. And that's the kind of continuity that I'm concerned about. And I just don't see. Some people don't care. I care. I mean, that's just a first principle. Do you think race is an essential characteristic? Genetics, all of that? I think they absolutely are.
I think if you're not going to have a birth rate because the people of that country are fucked or they can't find a proper mate, and you're basically stuck in a position where you're going to have one kid and it's with a feminist, in that situation, you're way worse off because there's not even going to be a future of the country in 1,000 years if that's how you're going to continue.
In what way, though? In what way? Because some country like Japan is shrinking and will continue to shrink. And you say, well, it's fucked. And what you're referring to is a permanent recession and then ultimately the threat of extinction. But the Japanese people can always, that is where I would say you can use technology or politics to solve that problem. But you're saying, well, they're going to go extinct anyway. It's like, well, maybe we'll see after 100 years, and maybe they can reinvent themselves. But if you bring in, because that's what they're talking about now, we have to bring in all these immigrants to South Korea and Japan because of their terminal low fertility rate. It's like, well, now you're ensuring that it won't exist. Their culture, their genetics, their bloodline will not be preserved, and that to me is the saddest thing because it's like that's our face, When
It's
I look in the
so
mirror,
sad.
I see my face. That's
Bloodline!
my face is an essential
My
part of life, and
bloodline!
my face is a genetic characteristic.
My beautiful
If in 100
face
years
has
the country's filled with
disappeared.
people that don't share my
My
face,
beautiful
then I'm
face!
extinct. So it
My
really
beautiful
does not
face
matter
will
to me
go
if those people are liberal or conservative or communist. What matters to me is that they're still people, that we're part of a larger unit, an extended family, which would be race. And that goes for all Europeans. Indians, there's 1.5 billion Indians in the world. How many white people are there? There's 450 million in Western Europe. I don't know how many there are here. 60% of, so it's 200 and some million maybe. But there's far fewer white people.
Out of curiosity, Nick, do you consider it just a single white Caucasoid race is relevant, or do you factor between, like, for example, are you fine with mass Ukrainian and Russian immigration to America as long as they're white, or do you consider there needs to be a need for a certain ethnic makeup between the different European nations to construct an ideal future American?
I think that we should have no immigration for honestly, but but here's the thing, I don't have really a propositionally positive position because something is happening now. The positive proposition is the mass immigration that we have now. And I'm saying I don't want that. You have all these non-white people moving here, have been moving here now. I'm saying I don't want that. And people say, well, would you like 100 million Russians to come here? It's like, no, I just don't want what's happening now to go on. And now, if we were to create and say, well, what would immigration policy look like? I think that, look, we're a country. Immigration should be a very small number relative to the broader population. What's the purpose of immigration? Right now, the purpose of immigration is to replace those that would have been born if we had a healthy fertility rate. I don't support that kind of immigration. I think we should bring in immigrants who, if they're really exceptional artists or scientists, I think we should bring in a very, very small number of them. Or if they're workers that need to fill a certain role, we should bring them in on a temporary basis. Those are the immigration categories that I support. But the idea that the native people won't have kids, so we're going to bring in other people to replace their would-be kids, categorically, I don't support that kind of immigration. That's the definition of replacement, whether it's Russians, Africans, Asians, it's a distinction without a difference. And I think the government
But the problem is, it's evolutionary. It's a Darwinism. It's like social Darwinism, effectively. That is the problem. If you already have come to a certain point where now inevitably you reach failure, there needs to be a foreign ingredient that fixes this to a certain extent. Because look, things are not fixing themselves. Look at Japan, for instance. They're extremely isolated. They have an extremely isolationist culture, and they have had this type of culture for thousands of years. And where has it led them? Right. So
I think historically, the American original Puritan colonies, they did just grow independently. They didn't even have much mixture between the different colonies. So it is absolutely possible. It's true for most nation states too. While there is some mixing, it's fine for a race to grow internally. I actually don't disagree with Nick in a kind of strong shutdown of immigration and a focus on fertility policy inside the nation with only high-skilled immigration. Honestly, what I wonder, though, is Nick, you're obviously a white nationalist and very concerned about saving the white race, but isn't that a bit like the white race itself? Don't you define, a little bit more fine-grained than that? There's not even the American was always understood as a certain almost new race as a product of not just the Anglo-Saxon, but the other admixture from the Nordics, and then a second wave of Mediterranean. That's why I ask about like Russia. There hasn't been a large movement of Slavic blood into America, but when you define just a general, white Christian, you open that up, and that would change the constitution of American, blood character.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of Slavic people. It just depends on where you go. Like Poland, they think Chicago is like the largest Polish community outside of Poland. It's like millions of them. They're not Russians, but they're Slavic. But I think that, I mean, I guess I get what you're saying, but I would say America's an established country. So no, I don't think we should have massive amounts of immigration at this point from any country, for that matter. Like I said, I really support immigration because immigration's a policy. We can choose who comes in here and who doesn't. And I think why should we let them in? Because they help our country. And to me, what's beneficial is they provide their skills, they provide their art, and that happens in a very limited quantity or for a temporary basis. And that's it. But it's not to come over here to be, setting up colonies. Because that, even with Polish people, that is sort of in effect what they do. Like a lot of Polish people, it's funny, my grandmother is like sort of racist, and she doesn't like the Polish people more than anybody. She's very old school, she's a different generation, she's 80-some years old, and she gets along with the Hispanics and even the black people. She's like, Polish people don't speak English and blah, blah, blah. And irony being is like, this is just another kind of diversity, and they're setting up another kind of colony, and it's like, I just want to live in America. I want to live in America, and America's distinct. So whether they're coming from one place or another, at this point, it doesn't matter to me. But, the question is really...
I don't even disagree with you. I'm just curious about, because you're looking at the immigration shutdown now, but I mentioned earlier, I'm thinking in terms of 50, 100 years from now. As a future American immigration policy, what seems to make sense to me is a lot of self-awareness about a selective immigration. And really, even when we talk about just, what are high-skill jobs that we need right now, that's still just thinking about the short term, the next 10 years. When anybody we bring in, they're going to marry, they're going to have kids, and it really is something that changes the future racial character of what is a big melting pot experiment. The question is, are we going to be an open melting pot or have criteria that's just, do they need a job right now? Do we need to fill this role? Or is it something that is more curated about certain qualities, which race or the lightness of skin could just be one, but there's a lot of qualities you could curate for.
Well, throughout history, migrant workers, that's a real thing. In England, they brought people over to England to do their textiles because they didn't know how to do textiles. And that has happened throughout history. And then they went home. Then England sent those people home. And it would be one thing if it was understood as they're here temporarily as workers to enrich the country, and then they go home at some later time. And that's the expectation. But it's like, that economist Borjas, he has that famous adage, we wanted workers. Well, he borrowed it from somebody. We wanted workers, we got people. So we bring in these people to pick the grapes, and we bring in the people to do IT, and we think they're filling a job, but really, like you said, they're having kids, they're becoming part of the country. And, and on some level, I don't think that's the end of the world if it's in a limited quantity, but the problem is it's unrelenting. The number's always going up every year. They've become foreign-born has become a significant percentage of the population, and it is turning this into an alien nation, and that's, I think, what the natives have a problem with. We don't hate foreigners. I don't even think people have a problem with foreigners being here, but we don't want the character of the nation to be permanently changed, and that's what's happening. So, to put it succinctly, that's it.
I agree with you, and also it's that model is still contemporary in Dubai, for example, where migrant workers are treated as second-class citizens effectively, with no real path towards naturalization. We could do the same right now with migrant laborers if we were just high tax remnants and. We've already ended anchor babies this month, so that was their main route to naturalization. But it's also, I don't know if you could just shut down immigration completely. It is the tech right. They do have a point with global competitiveness and the need to hire top tier talent, but I agree too. It's not the H-1B farms. It's the 0.001%. But I wonder too. What's your policy or your theory on reviving the fertility rate? Do you think it's just about more money to the middle class without increased fertility? What's your thesis?
Well, I think that, and this, I hope this doesn't sound like a cop-out. If I was going to talk about government policy, there is no government policy that works. Russia, Hungary, they've tried things with some success, but it's limited. I think that, the crisis that is happening is it's a spiritual crisis. It's a lack of religiosity. I think that, feminism is a huge part of why the fertility rate's low. And I think that the only way, here's the irony. I talked about this on my show the other night. If you're a techno-optimist, if that's seen as techno-optimist, they think that maybe competition with China or the technologies of the future will reinvigorate the spirit of America and our most fundamental energies, like our sexual energies, as like a man, transmuting your sexual desire into innovation and building, and then also having kids. But I don't actually think that's sufficient. That's the big idea, is like, if we just do tech, everyone's going to get excited, America's going to be prosperous, but it doesn't solve for the actual problem, which is the spirit. I don't think technology can revive the spirit. I think only the spirit can revive the spirit. So, the country that has been able to reverse the decline in birth rate, or you could say a country that is advanced but has a high birth rate, is Israel, to their credit. And I don't think it's government policy. I think it is because they have an aligned spirit. They have a deep sense of identity, and that is both spiritual, national, racial. This is, and I give them credit for that. And we need that for Catholics. I think we need that for Catholics, Christians. I think we need that for white people. But it cannot be imitated. It cannot be self-consciously imitated for some other purpose. What I mean by that is you can't say, oh, the birth rate's too low, our economy won't grow, let's pretend to be religious again. You can't do that. It needs to be authentic. And that's where I really think that the techno-optimists, they're going to be let down when they realize, they're actually part of the problem. Like, they say they're trying to save humanity, but they forgot what humanity is. And humanity is not like making things more efficient and taking us to Mars and like that kind of stuff. Humanity is archaic things. And so I think that's the only way to get the birth rate up. You actually can't even think about it. You have to focus on the individual soul of individual Americans. If you try to say, hey, go out and fuck, go out and raise the birth rate, people are killing them. You're going to take people like high schoolers that are doing school shootings and killing themselves. Hey, stop.